It was my 38th birthday, and I was sitting in my truck, watching a video that was tearing my life apart, frame by agonizing frame. The message had come from an unknown number, timestamped 9:47 p.m., a time when I was supposed to be at home, opening presents with my family. I'd clicked play, not understanding, for the first few seconds, what I was even looking at. Then it hit me. That cream-colored wall? Sarah and I painted that 3 years ago. The navy comforter? She'd ordered it online, said it matched my eyes. And there she was, my wife, in our bed, with a man I'd never seen before. They weren't just lying there. This wasn't some innocent mistake or a friend who'd had too much to drink. This was deliberate. Intimate. Happening in the house I paid for, while I was out working, building a bridge downtown. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone, but I didn't stop the video. Not for a second. I needed to see it all. I needed to know exactly what kind of fool I'd been for the past 13 years. My name doesn't really matter, but maybe what I do does. I'm a civil engineer. I specialize in structural bridge design. My whole career has been about calculating load-bearing capacities, stress points, failure thresholds. I build things that are supposed to last forever. I believed in foundations. In doing things the right way. And I believed in trust. Sarah was a middle school English teacher at Oakwood Prep, one of those private schools where parents pay a premium for small classes and teachers who genuinely care. We met at a charity fundraiser when I was 25. She was 23, wearing a yellow sundress, laughing at my terrible jokes about canal levers. 6 months later, I proposed on the same bridge where we'd had our first real conversation. Chloe came along 2 years after we got married, and for a while, everything felt perfect. Exactly as it should be. We had the house in the suburbs, the good school district. We had date nights every other Friday. Our daughter was on the honor roll, played soccer. We had what everyone said they wanted. That morning, for my birthday breakfast, Sarah had made me blueberry pancakes. Chloe gave me a handmade card, colored pencils, slightly misspelled, "Happy birthday, Dad." The kind you save forever. Sarah kissed my cheek, promised my favorite pot roast and red potatoes for dinner. I remember driving to the construction site, thinking how lucky I was. I called my brother, Alex, on my lunch break and told him, life is good. Absolutely nothing felt wrong. The video, it had been filmed with a tiny, hidden camera, probably one of those wireless ones you can buy online for less than $100. Whoever sent it wanted me to see everything. The angle was perfect, capturing the entire bed. I watched my wife touch another man the way she used to touch me when we first got married, back when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. I watched her smile at him, that same smile she'd given me over pancakes just hours before. The video was 11 minutes long, and I watched every single second. Not because I'm a masochist, but because I needed the anger. I needed the fuel for what I was about to do. When it finally ended, I just sat there in the grocery store parking lot. I'd stopped to grab a bottle of wine for dinner, something nice to go with that pot roast. The bottle was still sitting on the passenger seat. I thought about going home, confronting her right then. I thought about smashing things. I thought about asking why. But then, I remembered something my dad told me when I was young and stupid, about to make a scene over a college girlfriend who cheated. He said, anger is a coin you can only spend once, so make sure you buy something worth having. So, I didn't go home. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I needed to see how deep this went. I pulled up my bank app, started scrolling through our joint account. Sarah had always handled most of the household expenses, I never questioned it. Why would I? We were married. We were a team. But now, I saw everything differently. Cash withdrawals I didn't recognize. 300 here, 200 there, always on the same day of the week. Restaurant charges from places we'd never been. A hotel transaction from 2 months ago when she'd said she was at a teacher's conference. The pattern was right there, clear as day. I'd been too busy building other people's bridges to notice the cracks in my own foundation. I finally drove home around 11. The house was dark, except for the porch light Sarah always left on. Through the kitchen window, I could see her loading the dishwasher, probably cleaning up from the birthday dinner I'd missed. Chloe was at the table, doing homework. It looked so normal. So perfectly, completely normal. I sat in my truck and watched them, like a stranger. These two people I'd built my entire life around. And I felt nothing. Not anger anymore, not sadness. Just this cold, clear understanding that everything I thought I knew was a lie. I was about to get out when Chloe looked up from her homework. She said something to Sarah, who nodded. Then my daughter walked out the back door, crossed the yard, and climbed into a car parked in the alley behind our house. I couldn't see the driver clearly, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly who it was. The same man from the video. What happened next, that changed everything. Chloe didn't just get in the car. She leaned over and hugged him. A real hug. The kind you give someone you know well, someone you're comfortable with, someone you trust. I watched her lips move, and even though I couldn't hear the words, I could read them perfectly. I wish you were my dad, 5 words. That's all it took. 5 words from my 12-year-old daughter. And suddenly, the betrayal wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about both of them. My wife hadn't just cheated, she'd replaced me. She'd introduced our daughter to her lover, let Chloe believe this stranger was better than her actual father. She'd poisoned my own child against me while I was out working 60-hour weeks to pay for her private school tuition. The car pulled away, and I watched the taillights disappear down the alley. Sarah came out onto the back porch, looked around, then went back inside. She was smiling. I could see it even from where I sat. Happy. Relieved. Like she'd just finished some difficult task and could finally relax. I didn't go inside that night. I drove to a hotel near the construction site and sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. I pulled up the contact for Marcus Black, a divorce attorney my brother Alex had used. It was almost midnight, but I sent an email anyway, *, I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. I have video evidence of infidelity, and I need to move fast, *. Then I opened my photos and looked at pictures from Chloe's last birthday party. Sarah had her arm around our daughter, both of them smiling at the camera. I'd taken that photo. I'd been there. I'd been part of that moment. And now I wondered how many other moments I'd missed while I was busy being the good husband, the reliable provider, the man who did everything right. That night, I made a promise to myself. I was going to burn it all down. The marriage. The family. The perfect suburban life everyone envied. I was going to take everything she'd built with him and turn it to ash. And I was going to make sure she never saw it coming. Marcus Black's office smelled like old leather and expensive coffee. He was the kind of lawyer who didn't waste time on sympathy or small talk. I showed him the video at 8:30 the next morning. He watched it once, nodded, and said, "This is enough." Then he asked the question that started everything else, "Do you know who he is?" I didn't. Not yet. But I was about to find out. And what I discovered was so much worse than just some random affair. The detective I hired, Daniel Reed, had the video analysis done in 48 hours. He used facial recognition software combined with social media cross-referencing. Turns out, the man in my bed wasn't a stranger at all. His name was Dylan Matthews, and he'd been Sarah's first boyfriend back in high school. They'd dated for 2 years before she left for college. He was the guy she'd lost her virginity to, the one she'd cried over when they broke up. The first love she'd mentioned maybe twice in 13 years of marriage, like it was ancient history that didn't matter anymore. Except it clearly still mattered because 6 months ago, Sarah had gone to her 20th high school reunion, and apparently, they'd reconnected. Daniel showed me the evidence in a coffee shop downtown. He had photos printed out, tucked into a manila folder, like something from a crime show. There was Sarah and Dylan at a restaurant in the city, holding hands across the table. Sarah and Dylan checking into a hotel on a Saturday afternoon when she told me she was shopping with her sister. Sarah and Dylan at a park, his arm around her. But the photos that made my blood run cold were the ones with Chloe. My daughter. Eating ice cream with Dylan outside some fancy parlor. Chloe and Dylan at a soccer field, him teaching her how to kick. Chloe sitting in Dylan's living room, laughing at something on his TV. And in every single photo, she looked happy. Comfortable. Like she'd been doing this for months. How long has my daughter been seeing him? I asked. Daniel checked his notes. It started about 3 months ago. Sarah had been bringing Chloe over to Dylan's house every couple of weeks, usually on Saturday afternoons when I was working overtime on the bridge project. She told me she was taking Chloe to a friend's house, or to the library, or some school activity. I believed every word. Why wouldn't I? I was working extra hours to save for Chloe's college fund. I was being the responsible father. And while I was doing that, my wife was introducing our daughter to her replacement dad. Daniel had traced Dylan's background too. He owned a car dealership on the north side of town, one of those places that sells luxury imports. Divorced for 5 years, no kids, no serious relationship since. According to his social media, he posted photos of expensive cars, golf trips, dinners at steakhouses. He looked successful. Stable. Probably told Sarah everything she wanted to hear about how he'd never stopped thinking about her. How she was the one who got away. How they could have the life they were supposed to have back in high school. The worst part was reading the text messages Daniel had recovered from Sarah's cloud backup. She'd been sloppy about security, using the same password for everything. The messages went back 5 months, and they weren't just about hooking up. They were about planning. About futures. About Chloe. One message from Sarah said, "She asks about you all the time. She really likes you." Dylan's response, "Good. We need her on board before we make this official." Another exchange was even more direct. Sarah wrote, "He's been working late on that bridge project. Barely notices what's happening at home." And Dylan replied, "Perfect. Gives us more time to prepare." They were talking about me like I was an obstacle to remove. Not a person. Not someone who'd spent 13 years building a life with her. I sat in that coffee shop, reading those messages until my hands started shaking again. Daniel asked if I was okay. I told him I needed copies of everything. Every photo, every message, every hotel receipt, every cash withdrawal. I needed ammunition, and he just handed me a nuclear arsenal. Marcus had told me divorce cases with this kind of evidence usually settled fast because the cheating spouse knew they couldn't win. But I didn't want a settlement. I wanted destruction. The first thing I did was change the locks on our house. I waited until Sarah took Chloe to school on a Thursday morning, and I had a locksmith there within the hour. Then I went to the bank and moved half of everything in our joint accounts into a new one she couldn't access. It was perfectly legal since the money was jointly owned, but it meant she couldn't drain our savings. I canceled our joint credit cards. I called our insurance company and removed her as a beneficiary. I did 13 years of financial untangling in about 6 hours, and it felt like performing surgery on myself without anesthesia. Marcus filed the divorce papers that afternoon. I specifically requested that Sarah be served at work. She taught 5th period English at 2:15, and I knew exactly when she'd be in her classroom, with 25 students watching. The process server walked in at 2:30, asked if she was Sarah Hartley, and handed her the envelope in front of everyone. One of Chloe's friends was in that class. I knew because I checked the school roster online. I wanted Sarah to feel the same humiliation I'd felt watching that video. I wanted her to understand that her perfectly constructed double life was over. I didn't go home that day either. I checked into the same hotel and waited. My phone started ringing around 4. Sarah called 16 times before I finally answered. Her voice was shaking when she said, "What the hell is this?" I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You know exactly what it is." Then I hung up. She called back immediately, but I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. She left 7 messages, each one more desperate than the last. First confusion, then anger, bargaining, full panic. But I didn't care. I was done listening to her voice. Sarah and Chloe showed up at the house around 6 that evening. I know because I'd installed security cameras the day before, the same kind of cameras that had recorded her betrayal. I watched on my phone as they tried the front door, then the back, then stood in the driveway looking confused. Chloe was crying. Sarah was on her phone, probably trying to call me again. Then Sarah did something that confirmed everything I'd suspected. She called Dylan. I couldn't hear what she said, but I watched her pace back and forth in our driveway for 10 minutes while Chloe sat on the front steps. 20 minutes later, Dylan's car pulled up. He got out, put his arm around Chloe, and the 3 of them stood there like a family. My family. Except I wasn't in it anymore. That night, Chloe sent me a text message, "Dad, why are you doing this? Mom is crying and we can't get into the house." I stared at that message for a long time before I responded. I wanted to explain everything. I wanted to tell her about the video, and the lies, and the months of betrayal. But she was 12 years old, and she'd already chosen her side. So, I wrote back, "Ask your mother." She didn't reply. The next morning, I sent copies of everything to Sarah's school principal, the photos, the text messages, the hotel receipts. All of it. Oakwood Prep had a morality clause in their employment contracts. Teachers were expected to uphold certain standards, especially in a private school where parents paid premium tuition. Having an affair was bad enough, but the text messages where Sarah talked about manipulating our daughter and planning her exit strategy while still married made it indefensible. The principal called me personally that afternoon. He didn't sound happy, but he said they'd be conducting an investigation. Sarah's phone started ringing non-stop after that. I imagine her colleagues had questions. I imagine the parents had questions. I imagine her entire carefully maintained reputation was collapsing in real time. Marcus called me that evening with an update. Sarah had hired a lawyer, some guy named Stephen Miller, who specialized in defending the indefensible. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to talk about settlement terms and custody arrangements and dividing assets fairly. Marcus asked what I wanted to do, and I gave him an answer that surprised even him. I want full custody, the house, and I want her to admit fault in writing. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's aggressive." I told him I didn't care. I had the evidence. I had the moral high ground. And I had nothing left to lose. But that night, lying in my hotel room, I realized something that changed everything. Chloe wasn't going to choose me. She'd been spending months with Dylan, building a relationship with him while I was absent. She literally said she wished he was her father. And even if I won custody in court, even if I forced her to live with me, she'd resent me for destroying her mother's life. She'd hate me for taking away the man she'd been taught to see as better than me. I couldn't win this battle. The only choice I had was whether to fight a war I'd already lost or walk away with whatever dignity I had left. So, I made a decision that night that most people would call unforgivable. I decided to let Chloe go. Not because I didn't love her, but because forcing her to stay would destroy us both. And I texted Sarah one final message, *You wanted him. Now he's all you've got. The divorce took 4 months to finalize, which Marcus said was actually fast considering how much Sarah's lawyer tried to fight it. Stephen Miller threw everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. He argued the video was obtained illegally. He claimed I was an absent father who prioritized work over family. He even tried to say Sarah's relationship with Dylan started after our separation, which was laughable given the timestamps on everything. But none of it mattered, because the evidence was overwhelming. The judge took one look at the text messages where Sarah discussed manipulating Chloe and planning her exit strategy, and his face said everything. Sarah lost on every front except the one that mattered most to her. She got Chloe. The custody hearing was where everything truly fell apart in a way I hadn't fully prepared for. Chloe was old enough that the judge wanted to hear her preferences. She sat in that courtroom, wearing the same soccer jersey Dylan had bought her. And when the judge asked where she wanted to live, she didn't even hesitate. She said she wanted to stay with her mother. She said I was never home anyway. She said Dylan understood her better than I ever did. And then she looked right at me and said, "He actually shows up." I watched my daughter testify against me like I was a stranger. And I realized Sarah had won the only battle that actually mattered. She turned Chloe against me so completely that even a judge's order couldn't fix it. Marcus pulled me aside after the hearing and said we could fight it. We could bring in therapists and argue parental alienation and drag this out for another year. But I was exhausted. I'd spent 4 months living in hotels, throwing myself into work, watching my entire life disintegrate. And I knew the truth that nobody wanted to say out loud. Even if I won custody, Chloe would hate me for it. She'd spend every day resenting me for taking her away from Sarah and Dylan. She'd count down the days until she turned 18 and could leave. So, I made a decision that shocked everyone in that courtroom. I told Marcus to withdraw my custody petition. I signed away my parental rights voluntarily. I agreed to pay child support but requested no visitation. The judge actually asked me twice if I understood what I was doing, and I said yes both times. Chloe wasn't my daughter anymore. She'd made that clear. And I wasn't going to spend the next 6 years fighting for someone who didn't want me. Sarah's face when I signed those papers was something I'll never forget. She'd been expecting a war. She'd been prepared to fight me for years, to drag me through court, to make me suffer. But I'd just given her everything she wanted, and she didn't know how to react. There was no victory in it for her because I'd surrendered on my own terms. I walked out of that courthouse, and I didn't look back. The professional consequences for Sarah came faster than anyone expected. Oakwood Prep fired her 3 weeks after the divorce was filed. The investigation had turned up emails she'd sent from her school account to Dylan, some of them explicit enough that the school's lawyer said they had no choice. She tried to fight it, threatened to sue for wrongful termination, but her union rep apparently took one look at the evidence and told her to walk away quietly. She ended up getting a job at a public school across town for about half her previous salary. I heard through mutual friends that she had to sell her car to make rent. Dylan, it turned out, wasn't as generous as he'd seemed when he was playing the role of devoted boyfriend. Once the affair became public and messy, once there were legal bills and financial consequences, he started pulling back. They stayed together for about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Then he broke up with her over text message. Apparently, the reality of actually being with Sarah full-time wasn't as exciting as sneaking around behind my back. I left town 2 months after the divorce was final. There was a job opportunity in Phoenix, a major infrastructure project that needed someone with my experience. I sold the house, packed everything I owned into a moving truck, and drove 12 hours west without telling anyone where I was going. I deleted my social media accounts. I changed my phone number. I cut ties with mutual friends who tried to stay neutral or, worse, suggested I should forgive Sarah for Chloe's sake. I built a new life from scratch, and for the first time in over a year, I could breathe. Therapy helped more than I expected. I'd always thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle their problems. But my new company required it as part of their employee wellness program. My therapist, Dr. Emily Stone, didn't let me get away with pretending I was fine. She made me talk about Chloe. She made me admit that walking away from my daughter was the hardest thing I'd ever done. She made me understand that loving someone sometimes means letting them go, even when it destroys you. It took almost a year of weekly sessions before I could talk about that custody hearing without feeling like I was drowning. Work became my salvation. I threw myself into projects, worked 16-hour days, and earned a reputation as the guy who could solve impossible problems. I got promoted twice in 18 months. I started traveling for consulting gigs, designing bridges in cities I'd never heard of, meeting people who knew nothing about my past. I dated a little. Nothing serious, just dinner and conversation with women who didn't ask too many questions about why I didn't have kids. I learned to live with the empty space where my family used to be. 3 years after the divorce, I got a letter forwarded through Marcus's office. It was from Chloe. She was 15 now, almost 16. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 2 weeks. I'd pick it up, feel the weight of those pages, imagine what she'd written, but I never opened it. Because I knew what it would say. Sorry. Explanations. Second chances. And none of it would change what happened in that courtroom 3 years ago. Chloe had made her choice when she put on Dylan's soccer jersey and told a judge I never showed up. She'd made her choice when she hugged him in that alley and wished he was her father. And I'd made mine when I signed away my rights rather than force her to live with someone she didn't want. So, I wrote "Return to Sender" on the envelope and mailed it back to Marcus's office with instructions not to forward anything else from her. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. I met Olivia 6 months after I returned that letter. She was an architect working on the same project, divorced with no kids, and she understood what it meant to start over. We took things slow, dated for a year before moving in together, got engaged on a beach in Florida with nobody watching but the seagulls. She never pushed me to reconcile with Chloe. She never suggested that family was more important than self-preservation. She just loved me exactly as I was, damaged parts and all. We got married in a small ceremony with 10 people. And for the first time since my 38th birthday, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. People ask sometimes if I regret walking away from Chloe. If I wonder what she's doing now. If I ever think about reaching out. And the honest answer is yes, sometimes I do. But I also remember sitting in my truck, watching my daughter hug another man and wish he was her father. I remember her testimony in that courtroom. I remember 3 years of silence before she decided she needed me again. And I know that some relationships aren't worth saving, even when they're supposed to be sacred. Sarah wanted to replace me, and she succeeded. Chloe wanted a different father, and I gave her that freedom. They both got exactly what they asked for, and I got my life back. I'm not the same person I was before that video arrived. I'm harder now. More cautious. Less trusting. But I'm also free. Free from the weight of people who didn't value me. Free from the obligation to fix things that others broke. Free to build something new with someone who actually wants to be there. And that's worth more than any bridge I've ever designed. You decide which relationships deserve your foundation, and which ones you leave as ruins in your past. What do you think about this story?